All right, I have a question for you. This one is near and dear to my heart. But so my pops has dementia. Okay. I know I've seen a bunch of articles about you, obviously, when I was looking you up even last time. And it seems like there's some criticism, and I don't know if this is people trying to make you more radioactive. I don't know what exactly it is, about how you made maybe your big first chunk of money. I don't even know how much money you made.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And this pisses me the hell off because I know how cynical the intentions are of just deceiving and straight up lying to people about it. And at some point,
but about what?
So I'll lay out. Yeah. So like there's this false allegation that somehow there was an Alzheimer's trial that I made a bunch of money off of that failed. It's bullshit. But here's actually the realities. I think it's actually more important than that. It's there's a lot in my own business background that informs my worldview and what we're trying to do for the country. So I started a biotech company. It was my first company, major company that I started back in 2014.
Okay.
I'd been an investor. I worked at a hedge fund in New York. And it turned out pharma companies are among the more inefficient companies when it comes to allocating their money to developing drugs. A bunch of pharma companies tend to get out of a therapeutic area at the exact same time. So when they throw in their towel, they all kind of follow the fad and go in a new direction. And there's a lot of reasons why, but they all kind of throw the towel in the same areas at the same time that go from being in favor to out of favor. So my premise was to start a biotech company that took a lot of the projects that they had discarded after spending a lot of money on them. Find the ones that they discarded, not necessarily because they were bad drugs.
Oh, because it wasn't a trend.
Yeah, because it was a trend, and they had capital allocation issues that they had to allocate in a new direction.
And see if you could make one of those drugs work.
Exactly. And so some of these areas were women's health and urology. Alzheimer's was one of these areas for sure, where 99.7% of drugs ever tested for Alzheimer's disease had failed. A bunch of these companies are just like, throw in the towel. So I set up a company called Roivant. And the whole model was, A, you give skin in the game to the scientists who actually develop these drugs. They don't get that at big pharma. And B, focus on the areas where pharma had abandoned them. A subset of these are going to work. Not all of them are going to work. Biotech is a game of, it's a numbers game.
Yep.
But enough are going to work to be able to create a successful company. And I was convinced of that based on what I had seen. So I started the company. We developed a number of drugs in these subsidiaries. So each of those units, one was focused on Alzheimer's, one was focused on women's health, one was focused on dermatology and so forth. And the way I made my money was that 5 of those drugs that we developed through phase 3 in successful phase 3 studies went on to become FDA approved. And the one I'm probably most proud of is a drug actually for the smallest of those markets. But there is a disease where 20 kids a year are born with this genetic condition, where 100% of those kids die by the age of 3 if they're untreated. And because of the therapy that we led all the way to get through approval in phase 3, about 70% of those kids live lives of normal duration. Another for endometriosis, for uterine fibroids, women's health conditions that were generally ignored by pharma. So those were the areas that we had success.
5 out of how many, you think?
There's many more that are still in development, but there were probably 20 drugs that we've put into development, 20 plus, many of which are still in the development process. But 5 of them ended up going through phase 3, successful, sold those rights to other pharma companies, generated billions of dollars in value for shareholders. And the company I founded, Roivant, is like a $8, $9, $10 billion publicly traded company on the NASDAQ today that's returned billions of dollars to shareholders. And I'm proud of that. And it was a very cool company that bucked the trend of pharma. And a lot of people in big pharma didn't like it because it in some ways made traditional big pharma look bad because it called the bluff on a lot of these areas they were ignoring. And that's how the company succeeded.
Oh, so you think there's like a smear campaign?
You know, I think initially a lot of pharmas did not like Roivant's existence. That's definitely true. But when I entered the realm of politics, which is the realm of smear campaigns, there was definitely a concerted effort to exploit one of the drugs that failed.
That's the Alzheimer's.
That's the Alzheimer's drug.
Right.
So we had a subsidiary called AlexxMedia. It was developing a drug for Alzheimer's disease.
So Roivant is
the parent company.
Subsidiary is
and it's got a bunch of subsidiaries. MyEvent is one. Took it public. Ended up being sold for a big premium. Immunovant took it public. Trades at a big premium to where it went public. Eurovant, a bunch of them. It was acquired for a big premium. AlexxMedia was one of those companies. It was a subsidiary of Roivant that developed this drug for Alzheimer's disease. And the shares traded on the stock exchange, whole 9 yards. That drug eventually failed, and so the stock price was high. and then it went down and
Yeah.
it was low. And the false smear campaign against me is somehow I made money off of selling shares of Accident. It's false.
So you didn't make any money.
100% false.
You never sold shares of Accident?
Neither Roivant, the parent company, nor I sold a single share, though we could have. It would have been perfectly legitimate. Many biotech CEOs or many biotech companies do that to diversify. It turns out that I just didn't do that because I felt like we wanted to actually see it through and take the same risk that the investors actually took. In Accident, no good deed goes unpunished in the public in the realm of political smearing. Not a single share did we sell, and rode that big loss all the way down in a way that actually was tough. Like, it was actually a tough early failure to go through. And the way the company eventually succeeded was through these other successes. And the thing I learned is that once you enter the realm of politics, people do not give a crap about what the actual truth is. They have their agenda, and they're going to use it to smear you. And I think one of the things I've learned from watching Donald Trump, frankly, is that when people are that false and that malicious against you, at some point you got to actually take action. I mean, what he did with ABC, settled the defamation suit. At a certain point, you can't just roll over with this BS. And my initial approach was like, this is so garbage, I'm just going to ignore this stuff. But at a certain point, when it's that malicious,
because I think the perspective,
just roll over and take it,
or at least the articles written on it is, and I guess that there are people that are speculating on these drugs, right?
Yeah.
So you can develop a drug, and when it's in between phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 4, whatever it is, you can speculate, meaning you can invest in the company.
That's exactly right.
And then a lot of times these companies will spike in between phase 2 and 3,
right?
But it has to go through phase 4 in order to actually.
It has to go through phase 3 to be approved, or whatever
it is. So. In order to make money, they're inspired by greed. They don't really want to help Alzheimer's. They're like, oh, I think this is a profitable endeavor. Not everybody, but I imagine.
The stock traders.
The stock traders. It doesn't matter. They're just looking at letters and, oh, this looks like it's got a chance. They try to get in early because if it does pass phase 3, if they're getting it at phase 1 or phase 2 and then it passes phase 3, they're going to get a 20x, 100x.
They take that risk, and
which is also
and one big success pays for it. That's
exactly. But the idea,
model,
I think, is that you made money and then sold shares after it looked promising.
That's the false allegation.
Right. And they even said you put your mom in to get it approved or something.
Oh my God, the level of garbage about this. Yeah. So my mom was a geriatric psychiatrist who was in retirement, treated patients with Alzheimer's disease her whole entire career, and had experience in the drug development space as well. And she was one of, I'm going to start in the business from scratch. I'm going to find the smartest people I can.
Yeah.
She kindly came out of retirement. She didn't sell a single share or make money off that failure either. But the thing that people make, 'cause she wasn't a key employee at the company, but she was
one of...
But
the narrative is beautiful.
Yeah.
It fails over here. You bring your mom in, go, hey, make sure it passes. It passes, you guys make $1 billion.
And it actually, the trial failed.
Well, it failed at 3. Didn't it?
Failed at 3.
It passed at 2, right?
We in-licensed it after phase 2 from GSK.
But it never even did anything.
It's just like the level of garbage on this is kind of eye-opening, actually. People have, if they have an objective, they could care less about what the actual truth is.
Oh, yeah.
But what's the narrative they could sell? And you know what? Like I said earlier, I'm not going to be a victim about it.
Yeah.
You can stand up and actually explain it to people. People actually understand the truth. The truth is like a lion. You can't hold it back. It's only going to be held back for so long.
Well, I'm glad you explained it to me because I had a perspective. But this is not just politics. This is everything. I think when there's successful people that potentially could be in powerful positions, maybe they're not even powerful, you're going to create these narratives. And if the narrative feels good and justifies those people's pain or their bitterness, then they're going to run with it. I mean, you see this all the time.
Now, it's one of the things I kind of am keen to do more, frankly. I was always uncomfortable sort of talking about my own successes in detail. But one of the things I've realized is A, it can actually give a lot of people inspiration. And B, for people to actually get to know you, I think actually one of the things I would have done differently again in my presidential campaign is to actually talk more about my business background and the tough decisions we had to make at every step. Like that Alzheimer's failure, that was tough. It's probably the toughest career experience I've been through because it was still relatively early in the life of the company. The other projects were still well on their way. It actually strengthened in some ways the resolve of the people who work for the company to say, you know what, we did the right thing. We did it right at every step of the way. Roivant, the parent company, could have sold those shares when it was flying high. Didn't sell a single share because we were with our conviction. Even though that would have been the normal thing to do, we didn't do it.
Right.
But to say that that's how we're actually going to carry out each of these projects, and then the rest succeeded, those successes were actually far more meaningful in light of actually having gone through a
Because the narrative is that's how you made all your money.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's how you lost all of your money.
Exactly. That's how I lost a ton on paper, a lot of time. And then ended up coming all the way back.
Like if you're gonna get blamed for it anyway.
You know what? In retrospect, like that was like what a lot of my friends who were close to me said. You might as well have just done it because it's not. That would have been perfectly legal and acceptable. It might not have been what I felt like was the right thing to do.
Dude, this happens all the time.
It's insane. Is that having not done it, this will be the case, and that's what most normal biotech CEOs could do: diversify a little bit or whatever. And so the thing they pick on is Roivant, which is the parent company. And just for completeness, Roivant, the parent company, was developing a bunch of these drugs. We did a financing at Roivant, the parent, where there was so much demand in one of our financings. It was $500 million financing, but more investors wanted to put in money. The only way we were able to accommodate that capital was the investors in Roivant selling a certain number of shares in Roivant. I was to the order of about $30 million at that point in time. Those shares that I sold then are worth way more today than they were back then. So I actually lost financial value by doing it. But that's the hook. It was a totally different company that you sold shares in that people will say he made money off of an Alzheimer's failure, which is, it's an eye-opening lesson to how dirty American politics works.
Yeah.
But it's also a lesson for me to say, you know what, I think you got to actually, people don't just want to know about your policies.
Yeah.
I think they want to understand the struggles you've been through. And I've sometimes been not as personally natural in talking about it.
We don't vote for the policy, we vote for the person.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
policy secondarily.
And a lot of those experiences help shape me to who I am, to believe that, you're going to go through hardship from time to time. You get through that by actually, mostly coming out stronger on the other side of it if you can.
I think addressing blatant lies, I think is important. It's something that we go through all the time because, people make these things up that are just like so absurd. You're like, there's nobody stupid enough to actually believe this.
Yeah.
But then you see narratives take on.
Totally.
And then you're like,
that was my wish. It's just like, okay, this is so garbage.
Yeah.
That's what you're gonna, and then they start making up other stuff. They say, well, the only drug he got approved was a trans drug.
Oh no, I haven't seen that.
It's just like, okay, I don't know what the hell that's about.
What's the trans drug?
There's no trans drug.
Yeah.
I just like, that is
we should invent that though. That's a good idea. Drug that makes you trans.
But it's like, it's at a level of insanity. I think there's one drug that was approved for prostate cancer, endometriosis, and uterine fibroids, and works on certain hormones in the body.
Yeah.
Somebody should be sued for malpractice if they're giving a drug that's only approved for that for some other thing. And it would be ridiculous to think that it was.
Yeah.
But people say stuff, and then I know from the inbounds that I get to say that, we're going to ask you these inquiries. It's like, where are these people getting this stuff?
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you know what? You got to actually just stand for what's true.